Well, I'm gonna guess that Guy Henson has introduced me and maybe run you through a little bit of background of Kinsey and how long we've been in the Lawson community and what we do from a product side, from the development side, for Lawson customers. So we've built a suite of applications that we call our compliance dashboard that deal with security issues and auditing of transactions. So I'm going to walk through a PowerPoint I have, and then as time permits, I'll jump in and show you actually some running products so you can get a feel for how the product looks and feels. And we'll talk about all the different elements that we provide. Now, each of these, it really can run standalone. There is one component that requires a couple of the others as we get into the SOD remediation bundle. But for the most part, you can pick and choose a la carte which of these applications would maybe best fit for your organization. We have a lot of clients that run everything that you'll see here, and we have quite a few that just have picked two or three of the applications, and then over the years they'll add on one or two applications. But they all work together, and they all have the ability to drill between the applications and give you more insight to other data. But if you just want to look at security reporting or you just have a need for segregation of duties, those are applications that we've built so that you could start with just one application and build up the suite of products from there. So we're going to talk a little bit just about, I'm not going to go too much about us, I'll let Guy talk to you about that, and I want to go through mainly our solutions and what our objective is from these. And then again, we'll try to get into some actual product. We'll skip the Kinsey information. So let's talk about the products that we have. Now we're really attacking this from two different sides. One is at the security level, where we're really looking at your LDAP model and your landmark database security model for what users have access to, and do they have more access, and maybe are they over provisioned and they have access to things that could cause fraudulent transactions, and then also who's making changes to the security model, and when those changes are being made, how is that impacting other users, which we can look at through the modeling application. Or I may even want to have monitor critical changes. So if rule changes to users are being modified in the system, I may want to be notified of that. If somebody's making a rules change to a critical form, I may want a notification on that. So if we enable, access to HR 11.1, the employee maintenance screen, or maybe journal entries, maybe you've opened up and given access to GL 40, then we may want to know that on a more monitored and active basis, be proactive about how we're letting and who we're letting have application access into these programs. So security reporting for Landmark and S3 is going to really tell us what kind of access users have, what forms they can get into, what system codes they have, programs, everything you can imagine inside S3 security. And on the Landmark side, it's going to be actors and roles in the business objects and breaking out of that Lawson programming language, or LPL, into the different objects so you can kind of interpret what's going on inside your landmark applications. So then security modeling is where we can build these what-if scenarios and do simulations on changes to security. So if I add a role to a user, tell me what the impact on their security is going to be. If I remove a security class from a role, tell me everybody that's going to get impacted by that. And we can show you down to the form level or table level object how their security is actually going to change. So before you make those changes, you can simulate those changes, and we'll tell you if you're going to get the results that you're looking for. And then, of course, security auditing is where we're tracking every change made to Lawson security. And again, you can be proactive on monitoring the activity there. So if a change is made to something critical, like a role is added to a user, that may be something you want to monitor. Now, still on the security side are two products, and one of them wraps around what we call activity monitor. So segregation of duties, again, looking at security, is where we're looking for these proper checks and balances. So we want to make sure that a user that can have access to vendor maintenance and can set up a vendor can't also enter an invoice and cut a check. So they shouldn't have the payment process or the invoicing process if they have control over the vendor file, because they could set up a one-time vendor or just a temporary fake vendor and cut checks to themselves. So we've built about 200, actually we're about 300 rules now that are using 25 or 2,600 different, or 300 policies using 2,600 rules to make sure your users don't violate these policies. And you can decide which ones you want to use, and I'll explain that as we get into that application. Then we have, I'll skip to the bottom, we have this SOD conflict remediation product. And what we're doing there is once we show you where the conflicts are, we want to help you resolve those. So one of the things we do with that is we use our activity monitor, which is the middle product you see here. That's a product that monitors all activity within Lawson. So we know every form somebody has gone into, how they used it, the key to the record, like what the employee was or what the vendor was or what the journal entry was. We know everything about that transaction, from at least who was in it, who touched it, and how they used the form. So if they're just doing inquiries, are they doing changes? When we put that together with the SOD violation rules, we can tell you which of your policies are probably at highest risk. So if we know people have violated a policy, but they're never using the forms that are causing that violation, it's probably a lower risk violation, and maybe we don't need to focus on it. But if we do have somebody who is, in prior example, that is doing vendor maintenance and is also entering invoices, then we see that activity, we know they're violating that rule, that's something we want to take a look at. Now, when we start getting into not just monitoring the activity, but we really want to know what people are changing. So I want to know the data behind the change. And so I know what the value was before, and I want to know what it was changed to. You may have activated some of this in Lawson already. So on the S3 side, you had this ability for about 27, I think is the last count I had, forms, and they're mainly master files. So, it's the inventory master, it's the vendor master, it's the customer master. There's some invoicing that you can monitor there too. But we'll do all of it's like almost 7,000 forms in Lawson. And there's multiple ways you can develop rules around those. So we can look at, we can develop things from certain IP addresses we can track. We can look at, if you want to look at activity that's from 12 at night till 4 a.m. and any changes done, because there shouldn't be anything going on. If you want to look at everything audited for a particular person, you can do that. So there's a lot of different ways to set up these rules. So let's take a deeper look into some of this and what we're really trying to help you with and what our objective here is. So I talk about increasing visibility, right? That's where you now have more visibility into your product than maybe what you had in the past. So, if you're not a security administrator, you might not have access to any of the reporting that's in security. If you're hosted in some hosting environment, you don't have access to your security data. So you don't really have an easy way to report on that. So we want to make sure we give you the tools where you can run your own user role reports and user role security class form. What is the rule they have on that form? You can run segregation and duty reports. So we'll pull all this data that's in your LDAP directory and Landmark, and we'll pull that into our database so that you can run off our dashboard all of your own reports. Now, there's a lot of things you can schedule reports, you can have favorite reports, it can be email notifications. There's all types of things you can do with our reporting once you're in there. But what we really want you to be able to do is have this visibility into your applications that you might not have now. So you don't have to be a security administrator. You just have to have access to our dashboard, and somebody has to enable you as a user and be able to run the applications. But in our security model, you could maybe just be able to run some user reports without maybe seeing everything behind how that is defined. And maybe you'll get into the SOD reports, but we can control that through our security. Now, we're trying to decrease your risk by, again, giving you SOD remediation. So if we find a violation, you can fix these violations by using our security modeling and build what-if scenarios so you can see how you would resolve those conflicts, right? We're trying to minimize your provisioning errors. We do that by allowing you to do some role testing. Say, what if I assign a role to this user? Is that going to cause any kind of problem with my SOD policy? So we want to minimize before you assign a role to a user or you change the makeup of a role. Let's see if that's going to cause a problem somewhere else in our security model. And of course, maintaining that model. So now we're tracking changes. We can put SOD notifications and alerts on schedules, and we can continue throughout after we get our model in line. We can continue to maintain that the way our auditors want it maintained. So let's look at some of our user access reports, the things we just talked about, segregation of duties, right? How we see visibility. So this is our dashboard on just security reporting for just S3. There's a similar one for Landmark. I'm not sure if I have that slide, but we'll see. So there's a number of things you'll see: users, role, security class, and all the definitions behind them. There's a number of things we can do here with these reports, you have favorite reports you see on the side. You can save parameters behind the reports and have a whole list of all your, not just your favorite reports, but saved with the parameters. You can set them up on email notifications. So if you want a user role report once a month for a selected number of users to be emailed off to the HR department, that's an easy one to set up for you. So you pick those users, you set up that email schedule, and that report goes off as either Excel or PDF. So there's a number of things we'll do in here, including historical reporting. So if you want to go back and look at what did my security look like on the first of the year, and what did it look like 3 months later, you can take as many, what we call a snapshot of your model, as many as you want and as often as you want. You can not only go back and look at those security reports from that point in time, you can also compare to those to see what's changed. So I'm not going to talk through everything here on the screen, but you'll see some HR audit capability down there where we're doing specifically things for audit, like the ones, give me all the list of employees that are still active in Lawson but have been terminated from the organization. Give me everybody who has a Lawson login who's not an employee, right? I want to know, what a couple others we have down there. We have some security reports now that reach back in, so you can run them based on your department. You can run them based on a process level, but they actually look at the employee table, provided you have an employee HR payroll application, so you have an employee table. We'll pull this data out, so now you can run departmental reports. So let's look at a couple of these work. So this is a grid of our user. I think this is a user role matrix. So what I'm seeing here are a list of all my users. I have every role lined up in these columns, and I have X's underneath their roles. So it's a really nice kind of high visibility of what my exact role assignments are. So we have 3 different ways of actually looking at user role assignments. One is just give me an X where it is. I can export this to Excel, and I know as a quick overview, I see where all of my employees are assigned. Now in this case, I'm running the one where I can actually go into the employee file, and I can pull out their status, I can pull out their process level and their department, and I can filter that way too. So if I just wanted a specific department, I can filter the report, I can save the report, and that can be emailed off. Now we have these role matrices that we have for attributes, we have for role security classes, we have for user identities. So there's 4 or 5 of a matrix report, as well as our traditional reports, where we'll have the user role assignments in a more tree structure, the way the LDOT model's laid out. So that's one. So here's a second way we'll show this user role report, where you'll see a user on each row, and you see all their roles are listed concatenated, so there's just commas or semicolons between each role. But it's just an easy way for you to turn something over, a report over, and say, here are the role assignments per user. You can use the grid if you want to use the grid. You can use this format as well, and you can search through, you can put searches on this role column looking for anybody that has, AC accountant, and it'll just pull out those people. So there's a lot of ways to use this. Now, there's also just the straight user role, where we're going to give you a user role combination for every row. So I see this here where A. Davis is lined up, and it's got all the different roles that are listed out there in the role descriptions. This is just another way of looking at this report. So it just all of our reports come out in multiple formats depending on how you want to use them. There's filtering technology, there's sorting, and there's what's called grouping, which allows us, and I'll show you in the live demo, how to look at things inverted. So if I don't want to know user role assignments, I want to know role user assignments. So show me a role and show me all the users assigned. Or show me from the bottom up, HR 11.1 or AP 10.1, show me every security class, every role, and every user it's assigned to. But I want to look at it from the bottom, not just from the top down. So I'll show you a little bit of that when we get into the product. Now, we also have another way of doing reporting. It's called a security analyzer. And I won't go too deep into this, but in essence, this was built for audit firms specifically that had a couple of requests. One was they wanted the users lined up side by side. So I had this ability to pick my users and put them side by side. So if I'm doing a comparison, maybe just for a department, and again, with Excel, I can go hundreds of users wide. It just takes a while to build a report. But I can take a department, line up my users side by side. On this screen, I'm looking at program, or I'm looking at actually token or form level. I have it at system code, tables, programs, fields. I mean, there's a number of different sheets that will come out of this report, depending on how you select to run it, where I get all of my security as it's built. But if you're looking down at the form level, I know exact level of access that the user has to any one form. I can go straight across the page and see their level of access. So when they're reviewing critical forms, it's pretty easy now to see where the users fall. Now, another thing we do is we'll produce this straight to PDF also, because generally auditors don't like the fact that you can put it to Excel, you could go in and change what's in the cell, and then give them a report and tell them that's your security. So you need to be able to produce this straight to a PDF, and then you can back it up with the Excel version so they can work with an Excel, but they know the PDF hasn't been changed. The other thing we do on this report is we resolve that least restrictive access that loss entitles that somebody how they get security. So by that I mean if a user has a way to get to it, it's like all inquiry, but they also have a path to get to that form as all access. All access is going to win because it's the least restrictive. We resolve that for you here in this model. So what you're seeing here is the level of access that user's actually going to get, and that's what the auditors really want to see. They don't care if they can get to an inquiry 3 different ways, they have conditional logic another way, and then they have all access, and then another way they have add change. They want to know, okay, what do they really get? And we'll put all that together and tell you if it's a matter of combining function codes, we do that. If it's an all access override, we'll do that. If it's conditional, you'll see conditional roll up, right? But we allow you also to, I think if I had the next slide, oh, I don't have it here. But what we'll do is on the left side of that, there's a plus mark. And if I expand the plus on any row, it'll actually tell me the different ways a user can get to that form, every role and every security class as their path to that form, and how we resolve the conflict to be at the level of access that we're showing. So that's a nice report that a lot of our clients used to use for department overviews or they like to give to their auditors. All right, so now let's look at segregation to duties. So this is actually a little bit of an outdated slide. So I believe we have over 300, and it's 25 or 2,600 policies, or rules anyway, but 300 policies. And this is where we're doing that, checks and balances, right, that I talked about earlier. So we're going to deliver a dashboard that's going to come up, and you're going to be able to give your policies a 1 to 5 star rating based on your level of importance. You can also disable a policy. You again save reports. It's all ad hoc queries. But my dashboard is going to at least give me an idea of my 5-star policies, how many of those are being violated in each one of my categories. Now, we deliver, like I said, these categories for you. You can add as many new categories as you want. You can build as many policies as you want. Right? But we want to deliver something to you right out of the box. So again, this is a little outdated because we have our new release that's actually coming out not this month in June 2018. So we've expanded a number of policies we have. Now, we build every policy at the form level. So you're going to see everything because every loss in customer starts with the same forms. So we'll build them all at the form level, but you can build policies at different objects. So you can compare, you can build a policy that says if a user has AP supervisor and they also are a GL supervisor, we don't want that to happen, right? We don't want anybody to have those two roles. Or I could say if they're a GL supervisor and they have the AP invoicing security class, that's a problem. So it doesn't matter what level. It doesn't have to be role to role. It can be role to security class. It can be if they have this role and they can get into GL 40.1, that's a problem. So, but again, we're going to deliver everything at the form level, but you can build as many of these as you want at different levels: programs, system codes, roles, tables, fields, security classes, right, and forms. So there's a lot of different ways you can build them. Now, when they're built, you can then run reports, and you'll see it's kind of hard to see on this slide, but we have two groups of forms. So again, it'd be like if you have AP 10.1 and you have AP 20.1, that's a problem. Now, our rules, logic says you have to have more than inquiry access. So if it's just inquiry, that's fine with us. But if you can do add changes, that's a problem. So in this case, I'm going to see over here on the left, I kind of have a grid here where the left side is the grid. I'm seeing that someone has access to AM 145, and on the right side, they also have AM 270. So they're in the AM analysis security class, and the other one is in the AC capitalization security class. This is a conflict for us based on the rule that we have defined. So what I either have to do is AM 270, I either have to take away from this person, or I have to change their level of access to just inquiry for this not to be a violation. But one side of this grid I have to change so that they can't do add changes on both sides and do something that might cause some kind of fraudulent transaction. Now, whenever you see hyperlinks or something in blue on our applications, that means I can drill to those reports. So in this case, I'd be able to click on, like the bottom, AM processing, and drill right into my security reports to see how is AM processing defined. Tell me everything that's in it. Or I could drill on a specific object and say, show me every security class that belongs to. So I might want to look at AM 270 and say, okay, I know it's an AM analysis based on this report, but I wonder if there's a security class out there that's an inquiry class, and I could change for this the role that's assigned to this user. Maybe what I could do is I could change their role to access the inquiry version of AM 270 instead of the all access version, and then they'd be in compliance with this policy. With this SOD, we'll also give you, kind of similar to the grid that we talked about for the reporting, we're going to give you a grid of where your violations are. So this will stretch across all 300 policies. It'll go down a row for every one of your users. And you can hover over, I can't obviously do here, you can hover over any one of the headers and it'll tell you what that policy is. And there's different sheets at the bottom, SOD rules and a legend, that'll actually give you the verbiage behind what that policy is. But this is a good way just to start out and look at this and say, okay, how serious is this issue? Once you've gone through and reviewed your policies, you can disable the ones that don't apply to you. You can change policies if you don't agree with them, or you can set up your own. Then run this grid, and you'll get an idea right from the beginning of where do we have our issues. Now, when we go to SOD remediation, we'll expand on this to show you not only where do you have your issues, but where are you at your highest degree of risk because of actual activity. But at least with just the core SOD product, you can get the grid and all the reporting and all the rules and all the email notifications, all that functionality is built into just the SOD reporting application. So that's the security side, right? So we talked about security reporting, the security analyzer, which is another way to report, security auditing. Did we go through that? All the changes, and then all of the SOD information. So let's look at monitoring activity. So this is where we get into, I won't read this to you. A guy can get you a copy of this if you want a copy of the presentation. We'll come back and look at, now we're looking at activity. So now we know they have access to it. So let's see what people are actually doing. So when we talk about activity monitor, there are no rules behind this. Now, we don't pick up self-service transactions. This is really only back office, portal, mingle, whatever UI you're using, users that are really kind of what we call, kind of a, not to say a power user, but an actual Lawson application user. Self-service transactions we intentionally don't pick up. There's just millions of them, and generally customers don't want them. So we're picking up people who have access and are using Lawson. And what we're going to, and again, there's no rules. So this will pick up your add-ins, anything that's really done through what's called an AGS call. So if you have a process flow with uses an AGS call, if you're using add-ins and you're doing updates on add-ins, we'll pick those up, or again, any kind of core Lawson transaction. So you'll see the information I have here is the user and the form they were in, and I actually know the IP address it came from. I'm just not showing it here. We know the date and the time they were in, and what's called the key to the record. So if it's an AP10, it's going to be the vendor. If it's HR11, it's going to be employee. In this case, I'm looking at like PO25 vendor agreements, so it's some, it's whatever I need to pull, whatever Baxter pricing is to pull up their pricing agreements. That's the information that I'm capturing when I go through this. So again, you see the function code, so I know if they're doing inquiries or changes or adds or whatever it might be. And then there's all kinds of things we can do with this information. But this does give you an indication of exactly what somebody's been working on, what records they've been looking at. I mean, we've had clients call and say, I need to know who's looking at specific HR11 records. Can you tell me that? And we can, because we have the key to the record. So I know the employee that's being looked at, and I know the person that did the inquiry. So it's just not changes. It's all inquiries as well. So what I do here. So if I wanted to look at more detail on Nelson about how their security is set from the monitoring, I can drill on FNelson, drill down to my security setup, and you'll see here now I'm seeing a report, the user, role, security class, the object, and what the rule is. So all I'm showing here is that you have this ability to drill to the security reports from within the monitoring application. But again, monitoring can run on its own without security reporting, and reporting can run on its own without the monitor. So then let's go one step deeper. So this is transaction auditing. So now this is where we do want rules defined, because we're not going to do is capture every piece of data on every form that anybody uses in Lawson, because you're going to have millions of records that nobody's really ever going to look at. So generally, our clients will know what are the critical forms they want to audit, or who are the people they want to audit. So we do have clients that want to audit everybody on maybe the Lawson support team that has full access to Lawson but is never supposed to make a change. So they'll audit the change function code, and they'll put in that list of users here. You see F. Nelson. I can string together a list of users, and we would audit everything, every change made by any one of those people. If they're doing inquiries, we don't care. But if they're doing any kind of add, change, delete, we might want to audit those function codes. In this one, it's going to audit everything for F. Nelson done on AP36 or .1, .2, .3, or on an AP20 and APPI.3. So we're auditing those specific forms. So AP20 could expand out to 5, and AP36 could be another 5. We're going to do all IP addresses, all start times, and you can see I can define retention policies, like how long do I want to keep this data. So this is saying remove all the inquiries after 4 weeks, but keep all my changes in firm for up to a year. Now, you never have to purge this if you don't want to, but you can define retention policies on each audit that you define. So then when I come back and I build my reporting, and you'll notice everything here is done in a browser. I probably have done everything in Chrome. It really works much faster, but IE is okay and Firefox is okay. We like to use Chrome. And we'll give you all of our products, by the way. There's no third-party app that you have to install to run any of these reporting tools. So now I can go in and I look at everything done. There's a lot of different ways I can search on this. I can just type in the advanced search option up here at the top, like a Google search, I can type in the word Lawson. It's going to show me every change Lawson, or everything Lawson has done. If I want to do more advanced, like maybe I only want a certain date range, and I only want a user Lawson, and I only want to know changes, that's where we go to the advanced search, and we can build nested criterion on the information we want on the reports. You can then save those audits off, and you can set them up on email notifications. So if you're concerned about changes being made to journal entries, you can just have the system monitor, and once a week or once a day, send you a report of every change made to any GL40.1 record, and it'll get emailed across. We don't care what the data is, right? We don't care if you want to audit inquiries, changes, deletes, whatever it might be, or what forms or what users. We'll pick all this information up. But again, we only do it based on the rules you define. So even if you don't audit a form, if you have Activity Monitor, you'll at least know who went into the form. You just might not know the exact piece of information that changed. And in this one, I think I'm looking at a GL40.1. You'll see I can expand out and see the detail. And it says this transaction was changed from 1500 to 1700. So I know the before and I know the after. I might have highlighted that here too. So that's where I'm seeing the before and afters of all these. So now, let's talk about SOD, the remediation product, and some of the monitoring or the provisioning we're doing and how we do the modeling. I want to get this through this so I can show you some actual product. So this is going to look similar to the grid that you saw for in the Excel-based grid. Only now it's color-coded, right? The difference is where there's been activity. So now that we're monitoring what's going on in the application, I know where everybody is, what they're doing, and what they're changing. So I don't care if they've done inquiries, that wouldn't be part of this. If they've just done an inquiry, that's fine with me. But if they've done something else, now I'm going to change the grid here for you. So the green means, you've probably read this already on the screen, the green will tell us that they have a violation, but they're not using either one of the forms in the groupings that I defined. So in my prior example, they haven't used vendor maintenance and they haven't done an invoice, right? So they haven't used either one of those. They have access, they're not compliant. That's a lot of greens. Yellow is telling me they've used a form on one side of the grouping. So they've done vendor maintenance, they've just never been invoice entry. Lower risk, something I got to look at, still violating, but not using them. So, based on the policy, if somebody's not using either, then they might as well just change their security so they don't have access. And if they're only using one, change their security so they don't need add, change, delete access to invoice entry, then give them inquiry only access. The red tells me they're using a form on both sides of those form groupings. And now we don't know they're doing anything wrong, but we do know they're doing vendor maintenance and we do know they're doing invoice entry, right? So that's something I want to look at. what we allow you to do here then is go deeper into this to say, okay, show me different ways that I could possibly resolve this. Tell me, could I put them in a different role? Could I remove the role? Could I remove a role from a security class? Could I change the properties on the form itself? What could I do that would possibly fix this problem? And then how many people would that fix, and what other policies might that actually resolve at the same time? So I don't think I go into that here. Oh, a little bit. So what we do is when we click on any one of the cells, the color code, it'll come back into another screen, and it'll show me the actual rules being violated. And what I can do over here on the left is I can click on AM 20.4, and this is an actual work. I didn't want to show names here because this is the actual client. And what it does on the right is it shows me everybody that has access to AM 20.4. Because I can't, you can't make the assumption that I can go to AM 20.4 and I think my task is AM process under the role AM maintenance. So I can't go into AM 20.4 and just change it to inquiry only, because that's going to impact too many people. And I can see over here, anybody that gets access through AM maintenance has all access. So, but what our application allows you to do would be to click on the right, on the all access on the right, and it'll tell you all the people that would be impacted by that change. So that's saying change it from all access to inquiry only, but I got to know everybody that's going to get impacted. So we want to make sure that whenever we recommend a change, everybody that's going to be affected by that change. But this application is, again, we're not actually making the change, it's just a simulation in the model. But we'll come back and we'll tell you that, okay, if you were to make that all inquiry, that potentially would fix your problem. And we'll go back on the remediation grid and we'll give you a check mark that that would solve the problem with that policy. But that's what that does. Now, we also allow you to do, when we're looking at SOD reporting, and this is start of standard SOD, you do not need remediation to be able to have this option. What we allow you to do is to test a role, a combination of roles, or you can even pull up the current roles assigned to a user, check off the new role you're going to assign to them, and we'll tell you if you have any violations in policies. So we want to have you build a role and have it be compliant. We know you're going to probably combine that role with another role, so we want you to put those two together to make sure you're still compliant. We'll allow you to do all that testing before you actually just go out and assign that role to somebody that might have adhered to the policies that are important to you. And now by combining two roles, each role on its own might have tested out okay, but when you combine the two, now you actually are causing problems. So we'll allow you to do that testing. And there'll come back a report based on the roles you want to put together, and you can see on the right how I checked them. And it'll come back and tell you, by combining those roles, you in fact do have violations. In this case, I have asset management violations if I were to combine those roles. So I'm going to kind of fly through security utilities, but this is where we're doing some of this modeling that I've kind of talked to you about at different levels. So we do this role-based where I can add a role to a user, remove a role from a user, add a class to a role, remove a role from a class. All the kind of things you could do, right? At least at the higher level. And we'll come back into our reports and we'll tell you what's changed. So it'll be color coded. It's going to look just like the analyzer report. It's going to be in Excel. And what you're going to get is a color code in a field if security changes. So if you've added new access to a form they didn't have access to before, it would go to green. If you've removed access, it's going to go to red. And if the access is changed in some way, it's going to go to blue. So it could have been by adding another role, the access you're giving overrode some other access. Or it could have been, in this case, the user had no access to these forms, and now it's going to give, well, it must have had something. It probably had maybe just INP. Now it's all inquiry. So it changed from one level to another level. And that's what the blue tells us. So we're going to, and again, it's all simulated. So you'll be able to go through and say, oh, I didn't realize we were giving, all access to these forms by assigning that role. Or if we make a role change by assigning a new security class to it, what that's going to do. We'll tell you every user is going to be impacted by that. If you're making a role to a change to a role, we'll find every user that has that role and tell you what their impact is going to be. And then I guess I didn't actually show security auditing. This is where we're picking up every change to the security model. Again, you're going to see a way to schedule reports, email notifications, if it's before and after value change, if you want to know role assignment changes, whatever it might be, we're going to capture all those changes. So the things that are critical to you, especially if you're trying to build this SOD compliance issue where you're trying to get everything back in line, a change to the security model can all of a sudden throw you out of whack. So you have to know if somebody's opened up all access to a form, you may want to know that, because that could in fact cause SOD problems for you. Okay, so a couple minutes here. So decreasing risk again on historical changes. So this is where you have this auditing capability where I have every granular change, anything that happened. But I may just want to look at it from a higher level where I'm just saying, I want to know what changed in my security model, my user role assignments from the first of the year till now. Just tell me everybody that's been added, everybody that's been deleted, or any change to a user's role assignment. Now in this case, I'm actually looking down at a more granular level. So I'm looking at the actual rule changed on a form, and that was done on, you see this is AM setup or security class for AM00.1, and I can see the rule change from ACINP to all access. If I want to know when that was done and who made that change, I can go back to my detailed security reporting. But any one of our about 40 different queries that we've built for security reporting, you can run these comparison reports between what did it look like a year ago and what does it look like now. It could be simply at the user role level. You could see how role security class assignments have changed. Or again, you can go all the way down to the object level, like a table or a form access, and see how that's changed also. Okay, so then we have some of these auditing things I talked about. I'm going to go through these. I'll show you real quick, and then we'll jump in a little bit of the reporting. And Guy will just probably turn this presentation off if we've run over, but I'm trying to keep it to within about 45 or 50 minutes here. So this is we have some specific reports that will do some audits. Like this is the one I talked about where these are active users if they've been terminated. So they have a termination date, they have a status in the employee record, but they've been terminated from the organization, but they still are active in Lawson. Auditors want to know that information. You then have the last time a user was active. It's similar to last login, but if somebody were to log in and not do anything, we don't have that information. But as soon as they've done something, they've done any kind of inquiry on a form, we now have that. So what we care about is looking at the last time there was activity for the user. That's what your auditors want to know. So we have that activity as well. So then we go down to users with no activity. We talked about a little bit. So they have access to the system, but they're not doing anything. And then we actually have, then this is users versus security. And this is, you can use our monitoring data, combine it with how your users have access, their security is defined, and we'll tell you what forms they have access to that they're never using. So the idea here is that you can then tune your security model, remove some things from them that if they're never going to use those forms, maybe we can change the role makeup or change the security class makeup, because if these users have access to a lot of forms they're not using, it's hard to know unless you're monitoring activity. So once you've monitored for 6 months, go in and run these reports, and you can pull out every form for any user that's never been used. And so you see out on the right-hand side, you see the hits or the number of times. And from that link, you can actually drill into the activity, and you can see how they're using the form. If they're only doing inquiries, maybe you don't need to give them all access. That's what this tool will do for you. Okay. Users lacking security, we'll talk about another day. So the benefits, I think you probably hopefully have seen some of the benefits. Do I have anything here? Here we go. So what our clients, right? So mainly I think what our clients will tell us is that they're getting reports, they don't have any easy way to get out, especially if they don't have access to their LDAP model. So if they can't get into security. The reporting, the functionality and how robust these reports are gives them a lot more insight, and they're a lot faster. So they're able to, they were spending days putting reports together for auditors that now it's just, they've told us it saves them an incredible amount of time on the reports they need to come back with, because they know their auditors will accept either the analyzer reports or just exports from security reporting. So that's what we're really trying to do, is give them more visibility and make it easy and save them time and effort on putting all these reports together. Again, you can come back to this. This is something Guy could send you, but we support this in a lot of different ways. You can be hosted with Lawson, with somebody else. You can have it on premise. Our reporting can be hosted. It can be on premise. We do this for 9, 10, 11. Again, I didn't go into the Landmark stuff, but available for Landmark. All kinds of options. So I'm going to jump over. Let me exit out here and just spend, maybe 5 or 5 minutes or so on actually what the product looks like. So this is the analytics page, and you're going to get some things like what's the amount of activity going through, how is my security auditing turned on. There's actually a number of different, you'll see dashboards that you can configure this on that I can select that'll bring up, and I have 4 of them picked here. These are my security changes, right? This is my security turned on, and of course the SOD in the lower right corner. So why don't I jump over to look at LS reporting? So you'll see all the applications that we talked about, right? There's the reporting, the analyzer, the auditing, all the modeling. We have some utilities and a visualizer, but those are just other tools that just give you more flexibility. So if I were to go to security reporting here, and I've already defaulted to the production server and the profile I want, but let's take something like user role security class form, and this will just give you a feel for some of the capabilities of the product. Now, the first thing I can do is I have multiple ways of doing filters here. So if I can just say I want this user equals this, so the user starts with a certain name. I can also go to advanced, and we'll build a list of users, and I can highlight the users I want. I can control highlight and say these are the users. I'll just add these to this side. I can do the same thing for roles. We'll build a list of your roles. It goes out and reads them. And so you can pick what roles you want to look at, what users you want to look at. Why don't I just go ahead and take these users, I'll take all classes, all forms, and I'll run this report. And it's just going to populate a grid here for us that now we can work in. And you'll see out at the right, we're always going to give you the available function codes along with the rule. In a lot of cases, a rule might say all access, but the only type of access that rule might have is inquiry capability. So people like to know, and auditors like to know, that all access doesn't mean you can change necessarily. So you're always going to get the available function codes. But I see here, I get user, role, security class, form. Well, there's a couple ways to look at this. I can group this by user, and let's group it by role, and then let's group it by security class. So A. Davis has 4 roles. Their AC accountant role has 9 security classes, and the AC burdens class has 9 forms in it, and I can see what those forms are, and I can see the rule assigned to them. So that's the top down. That's how you generally look at user, role, security class. Well, what if you just wanted to, what I call flatten out the model? I really don't want security class. All I want is a list of the forms and how they have access to. So I'll just say user form. So A. Davis has 409 forms. Some of them you can get to more than one way. So we were talking about this before. So he can get to AC01.1, 3 different ways. Through one role, but it's assigned in 3 different security classes that are assigned to that one role. And if you look at the right, the rule on one of them is inquiry, another one is inquiry next previous, and another one is all access. So this is a case where all access is going to win. In the security analyzer, we're going to show that in the cell. So if somebody who doesn't understand how to read the security reports doesn't know, we're going to tell them what the security level is going to be. So I know I'm going fast on this, but we have a lot to get in here in a couple minutes. Now, that just kind of flattens this out, right? I don't care what role, I don't care what class, I don't want to navigate down through. But maybe I want to invert this. So I'm going to drag the user to the right side. Well, I'll make it easy. I'll just close this, and I'll drag user up here. So now I just want to know what users have access to these forms. So I can expand this, and this tells me these are the users that have access to AC00. F. Nelson can get there 6 different ways. So now if you think about your critical forms, if you want to look at AP10, if you want to look at HR11, I don't know if I come out here and I can add a filter now on any one of these columns. I built filters on what data I pulled into the grid, so I selected some users. But now that I'm here, maybe I just want to look at specific forms. So I'm going to say HR11. So here's my HR11.1, .2, and .3. I see this user has access to HR director and the level of access they have. So this is where I'm saying, look at this, I call it flip it upside down, but you can look at the model from the bottom up. And if you think about being able to do this for any one of these reports, so how are my roles and security classes built, right? What's the detail behind a security class? If I want to know a matrix, right? So here's my role security class matrix. Tell me every security class is assigned to my roles. That's this query. So I can actually click on any column header and reverse the sequence, and I can see this is only in one. If I want to look at this one, I can see this is assigned to a number of different roles, right? Or I can just sort it by role and see my grid. But these are the kind of grids you're going to get. The one that I showed you on the PowerPoint was this user role matrix with employee data, where I actually can filter by the department or by the employee status and run this, and I'm going to get all my users. And now from here, though, I could filter further by process level or by department, whatever I might want. So you'll see here, that's how all these reports in essence are going to work. But we're going to give you a lot of detail into, exactly how your model is set up. The favorites is just a way for me, if I use this one all the time, I just right click and say add to favorites, and it just builds a favorite list for me. The saved reports is a way I could build a report, save it, and now we'll give you a list of all your saved reports, and these are scheduled to run on some type of time frame, right? You can build your own schedules. That's how this secure reporting works. A lot of flexibility here. Now, we keep the listener on this here too, this form or this dashboard, so that we can give you that same technology behind how do you build reports. So if I want to go to user form detail, you'll see all the different ways that I can query this data. So maybe I only want things that were done in a certain date range, right? I can do that. So I'll take everything for now. Maybe I want to look at a certain form. I want to say everything that equals AP 10.1, and I'll run this. So here's everything done to AP 10.1. Hopefully I'll get some results here. Now, maybe what I want to know are just the changes, or I want to know it by the number of transactions the user has done. So I could take the function code and say, I only care about changes. Now you can do this with any form we pick up. And I really want to know it by user and how many transactions. So F. Nelson's done 4 changes, Lawson's done 23 changes. I want to see what those 23 changes are. I can see it here, and here's the key to the record. Now, if there's an audit flag out here, that means I've audited this transaction. So if I click on this, I can actually go in to see what the detail behind this was and maybe what actually changed. And you'll see here's all the data we picked up, and down here I'll see the before and after. An easier way to do this is if there really was a change here, I can go to the advanced search, only show me the changes. Don't show me any blanks. View that report, and so I can see exactly what changed, and I see the terms was changed from PRE to net 30. But I just got to that detail just coming from my activity monitor. If you don't have transaction auditing, you at least get this level of detail. If you have transaction auditing, we have our own reporting screen like I showed you in the PowerPoint, and I can come back and build criterion here. In this case, it said it was a certain transaction number is what I was looking for, and that was passed through from activity monitor. But this is how the monitoring tool picks up all the data, and it allows me to look at any transaction in the system and drill to the detail behind it if I want to see it. So that gives you a little bit of feel. We don't have much time here to go through. I think we've had our 45 minutes. You're probably ready to get on with your day. So I'll cut it off with that. But you'll see, here's our landmark reportings out here for, I think we have something here for actors. Oh, I don't have it loaded up right now. But for actors, roles, and security classes. Let me go home. All right. And you'll see there's stuff we talked about, auditing, SOD reporting, the remediation grid, all that stuff. So let's quit there. I think it's been about 50 minutes. That's what Guy told me. You probably are all out the door anyway, but just let Guy know if you have any questions. We're happy to set up and do presentations with anybody in the organization. I do these all the time. Happy to jump on a WebEx and look at any particular product or anything that might be of interest to you. And thanks for coming to our session.